Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. Senator Hawley, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to the nominees. Thank you for being here. Let me start with you, Mr. Russ, if I could. You were, a few years ago, you were counsel for some years at Arnold & Porter. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Yes, that's correct,
Yeah.
Senator.
I just want to ask you about some of what you did there. I understand you represented a number of large pharmaceutical companies in your time there as an associate. Have I got that right?
That's correct.
Can you describe the nature of that representation? Let me just ask you a little more specifically. Did any of the work concern opioids?
No, Senator, none of the work concerned opioids.
Well, what about patent infringement?
No, Senator, none of the work involved patent infringement.
Can you give us an overview of the sort of matters that you did handle in that vein?
Yes, Senator. With respect to my time at Arnold & Porter, and it was some years ago, the pharmaceutical defense work that I did was primarily tort liability and tort liability with respect to specific products.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. That's very helpful. Judge Arthur, if I could come to you, I want to ask you about a case that you had a few years ago, back in 2017, end of 2017. It's a petition of J.O. This was an adoption petition where the D.C. Court of Appeals held that you erred in granting the adoption petition because the birth mother wasn't competent to designate a preferred caregiver under D.C. law. Do you remember this case at all? I mean, it has been several years ago.
It has been several years. I do
Yeah.
remember the decision, yes.
Let me give you a few of the facts, and then if you can't remember enough, 'cause I realize some time has elapsed, then I can give some of this to you for the record, because I don't want to catch you off guard here. And my purpose in asking you this is a case where you were reversed. You've been a judge for a number of years. Anybody who sits on the court for any length of time is going to be reversed. So I'm not trying to catch you out here. What I'm more interested in is just trying to understand how you think, and then also, as currently a magistrate judge, how you deal with getting reversed, what you take from that, how you apply those lessons. So that's what I'm after here. So in this case, the court held that given the birth mother's mental history, her mental health history, that she was not in a position to make a determination about what was in her child's best interest. You had recommended that the birth mother's determination about a preferred caregiver be allowed to stand. That's what the D.C. Court of Appeals reversed. The opinion said the child's biological mother had a history of mental health problems. She was admitted to inpatient psychiatric care at the hospital, where she remained hospitalized for a number of weeks after giving birth. She had long medical and mental health history, which is tragic. She'd suffered a serious brain injury at 19, had a history of substance abuse, and so on and so on. Her sister testified that the mother would wander about in New York and D.C. and Virginia. She was mentally ill. She was frequently homeless. This is a sad story, and often appeared delusional. So it was a long opinion. It was about 45 pages, which is a pretty lengthy opinion for the highest court of the District of Columbia. And I just want to the extent you remember it, I'm just curious about what you took from this case, and maybe more generally, being reversed, what lessons do you draw from that, and then how do you apply those going forward?
Thank you for the question, Senator. It has been some years since that decision was made. I do recall many of the facts of the case. I, however, have to admit that I don't know what the status of the case is, given that it did involve a related matter, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on the specifics of the case as a sitting judicial officer and as a nominee. In terms of making my decision, what I did do is I did pay close attention to the evidence in the case and the facts of the case in rendering my decision, and I applied what I believed to be at the time the appropriate standard in assessing the birth parent's choice of caregiver. As it relates to how I handle or how I would react to the Court of Appeals decision, I would honor it moving forward. It's good law, Senator.
Very good. Let me ask you, just from your experience serving as a magistrate judge, as you have presided over your docket for some years now, are there any particular problems that you have noticed within the D.C. judicial system that from your vantage point, that you think you're able to speak to?
As a sitting judge, it's not appropriate for me to speak on certain issues. I will say, which was alluded to earlier in the questions, And our response is that the backlog created by COVID-19 and the judicial vacancies is a primary issue for the court, and it must remain as a priority.
Are there any other steps or reforms that you'd like to see in the D.C. court system based on your experience that you think would help justice be better administered here in the district?
Sorry.
No, sorry.
As a sitting judge and as a nominee, it's not appropriate for me to comment on or to answer that question.
But the backlog issue is one that you've addressed. Do you feel strongly about that, it sounds like?
The backlog is an issue. I deal with the cases every day, and our judges make it a priority to address the backlog in cases. Our court is expanding its operations, and we are making headway in addressing the backlog.
Very good. Let me ask you each about criminal penalties. Senator Portman touched on this, which I think is a very, very important topic, given the terrible rise in violent crime, unfortunately crime of all kinds, but especially violent crime that we're seeing all over the country, and that includes here in the district. I'd like to know from each of you, are there any criminal penalties that you feel you would have trouble applying as a judge? Any penalties to which you have a policy objection or policy concerns? Let's just go right down the line. I guess we'll start with you, Judge.
Again, as a sitting judge and as a nominee, it's not appropriate for me to answer that question.
Well, so the answer is not no?
Pardon me?
The answer is not it's a maybe?
Again, I can't comment on me and my views on sentencing.
So what you're telling me is you might have some concerns about, you might have some policy objections, but you're not going to tell me what they are?
No, that's not what I'm saying. My personal views don't factor into any decision I make regarding sentencing. I am bound to assess the facts of the case in the applicable law, and in sentencing, I would consider any statutory maximums or minimums in the case.
Okay, what about you, Ms. Briggs?
No, Senator.
What about areas of law that may be over-criminalized in your view? Are there any areas of law that you think are over-criminalized? Ms. Briggs, I haven't given you a chance to go first, so and you're a federal prosecutor now, so let me ask you first.
No, Senator.
Mr. Ross?
No, Senator.
Judge?
No, Senator.
Okay. My time's expired, and I think there are probably others. Yeah, Senator Carper's here waiting to question. So I will, for the record, Ms. Briggs, since I didn't get to visit much with you, I want to ask you a little bit about your experience as a federal prosecutor, including applying the guidelines. I realize you wouldn't be dealing with the federal guidelines in this new role, but you have dealt with them for a number of years now. I think that's very important, so I'm going to ask you some questions about that. And Judge, I may give you another question or two about that case we were discussing more specifically to jog your memory. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Senator Carper, you're recognized for your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Thank you, Senator Hawley.